Lester?
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news in the Middle East, where 2 hostages taken by Hamas were just released. It comes 3 days after Hamas released the first hostages, 2 Americans, in a deal brokered by Qatar's government. Before today, the Israeli Defense Forces said more than 200 hostages were being held in Gaza. And it's unclear where that number stands now exactly, but it also comes as NBC News has learned from 4 U.S. officials that the Biden administration is advising Israel to delay a ground invasion in Gaza to allow more time for negotiations. We want to go right now to Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel in Jerusalem. What do we know and what do we don't know about this latest release, Richard?
So we know there has been a tremendous amount of mediation to get to this point. So as you mentioned, a few days ago, 3 days ago, 2 American citizens were released by Hamas and reunited with their families, brought to safety. And then a short while ago, Hamas announced the release of 2 female Israeli citizens. They are Nurit Yitzhak and Yocheved Lifshitz. And Hamas said in a statement, and this release was confirmed by multiple sources, including a family source, that they were released for humanitarian reasons and urgent health reasons. Hamas also said that it accused Israel of violating agreements, of violating terms of their release, but it didn't provide any specifics. So what we do know is that now we've seen 2 releases, not back to back, but 2 in fairly close succession. One of a group of what Hamas would consider foreigners, foreign passport holders, American citizens, now 2 Israelis. And we are expected, I would say quite soon, to hear statements from the Israeli government about this. Regarding the ground offensive, yes, there has been, according to multiple sources in the United States, some, I wouldn't say pressure, but guidance from the administration to hold off on a full ground offensive into the Gaza Strip as this hostage negotiation process is starting to yield fruit, although very slowly, and because of the tremendous risk of escalation into a broader war. So a second hostage release from Hamas, we can confirm it.
Richard, what's the thinking in terms of the nationalities? We were hearing at one point that it would be foreigners who would be released, and here there's 2 Israelis. Does this change expectations going forward?
I don't think so. We're in contact with people involved in this process, and the hope is that this will continue and that there will be more releases, that there will be another batch, potentially a larger batch. And yes, earlier in the day, there had been some hope that there would be a large group of foreigners, including Americans, perhaps even dozens, that didn't come to fruition. We don't exactly know why, but there is this somewhat cryptic statement within the Hamas statement saying that during the release, Israel, according to Hamas, violated some terms that they had agreed to. So this has also been going on for the last several hours. We and other reporters around the world have been waiting for this, trying to confirm this, obviously with great sensitivity, because you don't want to upset the process and obviously put any hostages at risk. But yes, I do not believe this is the end of the process. This could be more momentum, hopefully, to lead to more releases.
And again, we're hearing intermediary countries have helped in this release. Do we know what Hamas is asking? I mean, that's been the question since the original terror attack, is why, and why take hostages if for no other reason to have a human shield? Does this give us some insight into why this has taken place?
Well, Hamas took these people always to exchange them, to use as bargaining chips and as human shields. And going back about a week now, we were in contact directly with Hamas and with mediators, and Hamas expressed its willingness to release civilians in order to stop the bombing campaign, alleviate some of the military pressure that is happening on Gaza, where thousands of civilians, according to multiple sources, not just Hamas, have been killed in the airstrike so far. So this is an attempt by Hamas to show it wants to show to the world that it is not a terrorist group, that it has a sense of humanity. That is not the way many people around the world see it. That is certainly not the way the United States sees it, the way President Biden sees it. And that is something that Hamas has addressed directly while releasing these what he calls prisoners. It says we're doing this for humanitarian reasons, and specifically in the last release it said to prove that to disprove the lies told about it by President Biden and the outside world.
Richard Engel, I'll ask you to stand by for a moment as I bring in our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, the U.S. administration has been very clear that this is their #1 priority, that they have been working this problem. Do we know the steps that have been taking place out of view?
There have been a lot of communications, some directly from President Biden to Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi as he's known, some from Tony Blinken. They've been talking to officials in Qatar, in Egypt, in all the other Gulf countries as well. And there are reports that there have been communications via the defense officials to some former Mossad officials, the Israeli retired members of the Mossad, which is the Israeli foreign intelligence operation, their CIA. So this is a very complex issue, and it's not only the hostages. One of the chief requests, if you will, from Tony Blinken and the president were to get an established humanitarian flow of aid through the Rafah crossing before the ground invasion. So to be sensitive about the hostages, to have Israel better define its goals and map the territory, if you will, to try to get better intelligence. And they did go in on several occasions, including the last 24 hours and the last few days, I believe, to go in with special operations to try to figure out where the hostages might be and get a better sense before a ground invasion were to begin. I was talking to several sources over the weekend, American sources, who said that there would not be an immediate ground invasion, but that it would be, coming in coming days, that it's going to happen. Israel is not putting it off indefinitely, but that they wanted to try to keep these hostages talks going and get the aid in. And we saw a third aid delivery go through the Rafah gate about 2 or 3 hours ago. So that is one of the important pieces of this. And that was a very complicated operation because it was Egypt that was holding it up in the last 24, 48 hours. Before that, Israel had held up the crossing opening. They wanted everything to be inspected on both sides, and that hadn't been set up properly as far as Israel was concerned, so that every delivery was opened and inspected by them. And they're not in Gaza to do the inspection, but they wanted to certainly see it going through Egypt, as well as objections from Hamas. And they still have not gotten any of the 300-some Doctors Without Borders health workers out who are trying to get out, or 350 Americans, there may be some overlap there, some of them may be American, trying to get out. And Egypt has been saying nobody's going to come out through that crossing until more of the aid goes in. So that was another key piece of this. Very complicated negotiations for Lester.
All right, and we continue to report for those just joining us the apparent release of two more hostages by Hamas. Let me bring in Hala Garani now, who is live in Tel Aviv. What can you tell us about Qatar's role in all this?
Well, a source briefed on the talks, Lester, confirmed to me that these two hostages were released following mediation efforts by Qatar and Egypt as well. This source told me that the two hostages were chosen for release because they were elderly and frail, confirming that they were in transit. When I spoke to this source about 10-15 minutes ago, one of the families, we understand, has confirmed to NBC that indeed their relative has been let go by Hamas. The two hostages' names, Nurit Yitzhak and Yofshed Lifshitz. We are not exactly sure what route they took out of Gaza. The two first hostages to be released by Hamas last week were handed over to the Red Cross, Red Crescent inside of Gaza, and then were handed to Israeli authorities on the Israeli side of the border. Unclear whether or not these two elderly female hostages followed the same route. This is what we know right now. the Egyptians and the Qataris have been working on this release, and this is something that I think we can expect to see in other hostage releases as well. Qatar has been taking a lead role. They host a Hamas office in Doha, the capital of Qatar, and they have a direct line of communication with that group, Lester.
Hala Garani, thank you for that update. I'm going to go back to our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, live in Jerusalem. Richard, I understand you've learned a little bit more about these individuals who've just been released.
Yes, in addition to Hamas saying that it released them for urgent medical reasons, Israeli media now report that both women are in their 80s. So we are learning more. We're expecting to hear more from the Israeli government quite soon, as Hala was saying, through Egyptian and Qatari mediation, and negotiators that we've been in contact with just since we've been on air are optimistic that there will be more releases to come.
All right, Richard, let me bring in our senior White House correspondent, Kelly O'Donnell. Kelly, I watched the briefing at the White House there a while ago. There seemed to be no hint that anything was imminent. Clearly, a lot going on behind the scenes there.
And publicly, the White House wants to be very careful to not say too much while some of these very delicate...
They say the best things in life are free.
That's why Spectrum Mobile is giving you one free mobile line when you buy one unlimited line for $29.99.
Hey, so I can get 2 lines for the price of 1? That's right, for just $29.99.
Switch to Spectrum Mobile Unlimited for $29.99 a month and get a second unlimited line free for 12 months with no contracts. Call 1-844-559-2999. Visit spectrum.com/get connected or Spectrum Store today.
It's the best deal in mobile.
Free mobile sounds good, but is the service reliable?
Absolutely. Spectrum Mobile is super reliable, coast to coast.
Okay, but what's the catch?
Is it contracts?
No contracts, no catch.
Get one line for $29.99 and the second line is free.
All with no taxes or hidden fees.
Whew. Man, I'm switching to Spectrum.
You said...
Switch to Spectrum Mobile Unlimited for $29.99 a month and get a second unlimited line free for 12 months. Call 1-844-559-2999.
Get the best deal in mobile. Switch to Spectrum.
A specific number involving Americans who have been taken hostage. Obviously, there are other nationalities in addition to Israelis who are a part of that pool believed to be held by Hamas. And we don't know the circumstances of if they're held together, if they've been moved around, all of the kinds of tactical things that terrorist groups can do to try to hold that very valuable resource of human lives when they're doing this negotiating. One of the things that the White House has said very clearly is the president wants Israel to observe the laws of war, to focus on making certain aid can get in, humanitarian, food, help that can go to the Palestinian public that is there in Gaza, unable to leave, while also concerned that they don't want any resources like fuel to be absconded by Hamas or in some ways abused by the relief that's going in. That in and of itself is a very delicate thing. Lester?
All right, Kelly, thank you. Let me go back to Richard Engel. Richard, it's hard to imagine there would be multiple parallel negotiations going on. Is it your indication that the U.S. is leading these discussions, or how does it laying out?
I do not believe that the U.S. is leading them. I think it is being led by Qatar, and now we're seeing more involvement from Egypt. Qatar has relations with Hamas. It has very close relations with the United States. There are U.S. troops based in Qatar. Hamas also has an office in Qatar. So it is well placed to serve as a mediator here. The U.S. is absolutely involved, since there are still Americans who are believed to be among the hostages, that America's very closely allied with Israel, fully supporting Israel's military campaign. But my understanding is it is not Americans who are on the phone directly with Hamas working for these releases, but they are certainly informed.
And what about these reports that the U.S. has been pressuring or urging or suggesting that Israel's slow its roll a little bit on this roll toward a ground invasion? Is that tied into these negotiations? Are the Qataris and others being told that that's essentially on the table?
This is a line that we're hearing from the United States, that the U.S. has been encouraging Israel to slow down its possible military offensive. It may or may not be true. It could be that the Israelis aren't ready and are just looking for reasons to justify why they haven't gone in. There are many people in this country who are asking that of their own government. Why haven't they seen a stronger military reaction thus far? Generally, in matters of military speaking, Israel usually decides what it wants to do when it wants to do.
Richard Engel, thank you. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and tonight on Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later on this evening.
Musician